Today's video is going to be more focused on the Google Admin Console, and specifically people who are admins for their respective domains. What we're going to talk about is 3D content, and one of the stranger headaches that I've had regarding 3D content. So the first thing I want to do is go back and touch on something that I talked about in a previous video, and that's using a program called Zoom. In the previous video, I went to this website, zoom.us/test. And from here, you can click on this join button to essentially test your settings. And then it gives you a redirect to the Chrome Web Store, where you can install an extension to allow you to do this. The problem with it is that, if you recall from the previous video, that this button is actually not clickable because it says not compatible. And when you mouse over it, it says that it uses 3D graphics and requires WebGL. So I struggled with this for quite some time, and other problems were occurring with similar issues. One of them came up that was Scratch, the programming application. Upgrading from Scratch 2 to Scratch 3 also requires WebGL. So it kind of brought me back to this problem. I thought it was something that had to be gotten around using the Google Play Store. But I discovered that's actually something else. And the way that I discovered that is I thought about how I've never been able to find any information about not being able to display 3D content on a Chromebook, but all of those situations I was looking at were people who owned a personal Chromebook, and it was not a domain-joined Chromebook. That being the case, it occurred to me that maybe it's some policy or something that's causing this to work the way that it does. So what I initially thought I should do was to try and find that policy, and I believe that I actually did. So what I'm going to do is actually open a new incognito window, and I'm going to go to admin.google.com, and I'm going to open up the administration panel. So I'm going to pause just briefly while I do this login, and then I'll come right back. Okay, so I'm back. I am logged into the Google Admin Console at this time. So what I'm going to do from here is I'm going to go to Device Management. And the next step is to go to Chrome Management. And from here, what I started doing was I was looking for a setting that I had seen in passing before called 3D. And it was 3D content. And once it loads, you'll see that in user settings, there's actually a couple of specific areas that you can change things. And so what I'm going to do just briefly here is I'm going to pause the video again for just a moment, and I'm going to expand to the specific setting that I'm talking about. So I'll be right back with that. So as you can see here, what I've done is I've done a settings search here at the top for 3D. And there's actually this section here called 3D content, and the default is never allow display of 3D content. So in looking at it a little bit closer, essentially what you're doing is you're disabling graphics processing on the CPU or rendering specific APIs, in this case the WebGL API or JavaScript, things like that. So what I'm going to do is change this to always allow, and then I'm going to hit save. And now that I've done that, the next step is to essentially verify that it's been done. Now, for those who may not know, the easiest way to do that is to actually use the Chrome policy reloader, and it's a Chrome:/policy. And if you go here, you can actually reload the policies so that they're fresh. It'll say last fetched here. And then I always check this box to show policies with no value set. And then if you filter by name, you can actually type in 3D, and you can see that disable 3D APIs here is not set. The nice thing I like about the Chrome policy checker is you can click on these individual links, and it'll give you really, really specific information about these policy settings on the Chromium project website. And if you look at disable 3D APIs, the default, again, is that this is true. So disable support for 3D graphics APIs. That's the default setting, is that it's disabled. So what you need to do is change that to always allow, and then those APIs will always be allowed. But if you look here, it actually says disabling this setting or leaving it not set potentially allows web pages to use the WebGL API and plugins to use the Pepper 3D API. Default settings, the browser may still require command line arguments to be passed in order to use these APIs. So what you can do is actually enable that setting. And then if you go back here, what I'm going to do is refresh the Chrome Web Store page. And you'll see that now, instead of saying not compatible, it says add to Chrome. And you can actually add that application. And then here it is downloading at the bottom. The only setting that I had to change was the allow 3D content. And that allows the use of those web-based APIs. So again, this video is really meant more for Google admins. But on the off chance that you are not a Google admin and you've been running into trouble with not being able to display 3D content, or having trouble with programs like Scratch, or not being able to install Zoom directly from the Chrome Web Store, something like that, this is definitely something that you're going to want to ask your administrator for Google about to make sure that that's enabled. There are some implications to having it enabled. It probably would cause some performance issues on especially on lighter weight Chromebooks, maybe that don't have very much RAM, slightly slower CPUs, slower clock speed CPUs. It probably would make them drag a little bit. But again, it's only going to be on some websites that it's enabled. And I think overall, this does open it up a bit. And obviously, if you do run into any trouble with things like that, you can always go back and disable it. So this has been a pretty quick video, but it is a follow-up to something that I mentioned in a previous video, in the last video actually, about enterprise. And I wanted to follow up on seeing if I could figure out why that was a problem. And shortly after recording the videos when I discovered that. So this was the obvious next topic to cover. So that's been just about it for today's video, and I hope this was helpful to you.